Introducing the Milgram experiment, centered around obedience. Stanley Milgram's experiment done in 1963 took place at Yale University. Milgram was interested in studying obedience with a focus on how the commands of leaders influence people. He was interested in this topic because he wanted to know why Nazi soldiers were able to carry out his orders and kill unarmed civilians. He set up this obedience test by assigning a Confederate to be a learner and a participant. The experimenter, Milgram or a colleague, would order the teacher to shock the learner, increasing intensities for incorrect answers. The learner would then make cries of pain, and then the experimenter would tell the teacher to continue making the shocks. The experiment resulted in 65% of teachers carrying out the orders of the experimenter until the highest levels of shocks. Milgram's experiment demonstrated how people will obey authority figures, even when they are being ordered to do immoral things. This experiment has been criticized for its lack of application to other circumstances. It is also considered unethical because the teachers suffered long-term results. The topic of this segment will be on the famous studies conducted by Solomon Asch. His studies are studies of conformity, to test if people will yield to or defy majority standings, and this studies the influences it may have on beliefs or group behavior. In this experiment, Solomon Asch would have pictures of lines. Then, the people in the study would have to match the line here, X, with one of the three lines given in the options. This study seems fairly straightforward, aside from the fact that there are three Confederates. Between the four people in the study, three of them were Confederates, and oftentimes they'd all select the wrong answer intentionally. As a result, the fourth person, who was not a Confederate, would end up selecting the answer that everybody else selected. This would put that person in a predicament, and that predicament would eventually influence their beliefs or ideas.
Which line matches?
A.
Which line does this match?
A.
Factors affecting conformity include group size. Asch found that the group size influenced conformity. The bigger the group, the more people conformed. Optimal conformity was found with the majority of 3 people against the subject. Another factor is lack of group unanimity and the presence of an ally. Found that even in the presence of just one Confederate that goes against the majority, that can reduce the subject's choice as much as 80%, which is supported in a study by Allen and Levine in 1960. Oftentimes, when the lengths were similar, it was hard to decipher the right answer, especially when there is a majority against what the real answer is.
Now what?
Yeah, we're good.
Here today, I'm excited to have the opportunity to interview Solomon Asch over here. So, you are the acclaimed psychologist Solomon Asch.
Yes, I am. Nice to meet you.
Your experiment has been widely renowned for expanding the discoveries about conformity in social psychology. However, there have been many questions related to the ethicalities of your procedure. Do you believe your subjects experienced psychological distress during your experiment? Or was there anything you did to counteract the psychological distress they experienced?
Well, I strongly believe that they were not experiencing psychological distress during the experiment. The experiment was not intended to cause harm whatsoever. They were simply choosing lines and not seeing or experiencing physical or emotional harm. The only thing they might have felt was a little pressure to conform to the Confederates, which does not cause long-term distress. I also made sure that the Confederates were not humiliating the subjects and also were only focused on answering the questions and not paying attention to what the subject says or what the subject does.
That's an interesting argument. Your experiment was also criticized for using a biased sample. All your participants were male students in the same age group. Therefore, your results cannot be generalized to females or older groups of people. Have you done anything to widen the scope of your experiment to make your results more applicable?
Yes, I have. First, I found that there was a presence of a true partner. So if you have another person telling the subject what to do, then they were more likely to follow the person telling them. Also, the withdrawal of a partner, so that removes that increases conformity to the rest of the group, as you're not as you're on your own and you're trying to make your own decision based on what others think. Additionally, I increased and decreased the size. I kind of played around with that, seeing that if there's more people around, then a person's more likely to conform. If there's a smaller group, then they're more likely to go with their own instinct. Also I used written responses, which significantly decreased the level of conformity, as the subjects were not aware of what the other Confederates thought about the lines matching up.
Okay. Your experiment has been widely helpful in understanding how people conform in society. How have your results been applicable to today's society?
Well, nowadays, with the advancement of technology and social media, people, especially like young adults and teens, are trying to conform to the so-called norms of society. This kind of stems from the 1950s, where it was a very conservative, anti-communist, like witch hunt kind of time. Very sympathetic, left-wing views, and where people who had those kind of views were rooted out. And a lot of people joined together, even though there was no like definite proof of extreme communism in America. People conformed to each other and tried to root out any person who was suspicious of communism. So this caused a widespread fear in our nation. Additionally, there was studies in the 1970s and 80s that show that there were lower conformity rates for the left-wing people, as there was a widespread fear, and their fear of being like kicked out of the country or even possibly killed. Additionally, I have a quote for you about conformity. That we have found the tendency to conformity in our society so strong is a matter of concern. It raises questions about our ways of education, about the values that guide our conduct. And this reflects how important conformity is, and it dictates a lot of people's actions and lives, and it might not always be the best decision. So yeah, that's all I have to say today, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for your insight. The results of your experiment have made great contributions to society, and I look forward to your further contributions in the future.
Thank you.
The topic of this segment will be on the famous Asch experiments. The Asch conformity experiment were a series of tests conducted by Solomon Asch to test if people will change or defy certain majority group standings and conform.
In August 1971, I led a team of researchers at Stanford University to study the dynamics between a prisoner and a guard in a prison environment. The experiment was meant to last 2 weeks, but ended after only 6 days. 24 students were selected to participate, 12 prisoners and 12 guards. The sample was skewed because it was entirely male and all college-aged students. I made myself the superintendent of the simulated prison, and my researchers were wardens, but were not directly involved with the mistreatment of the prisoners.
In order to make the simulation as realistic as possible, the prisoners were arrested at their homes and taken to the police station, then taken to the basement of the psychology department of Stanford, which has been set up as a prison. There were barred doors and windows and bare walls and cells.
The prisoners and guards were given uniforms to fit their roles. Guards were given khaki-colored uniforms, a whistle, a billy club, and sunglasses to prevent eye contact with prisoners. Prisoners wore a smock uniform with their number on it and had a tight nylon cap to cover their hair and a locked chain around their ankle. These uniforms were to help participants play their role and feel as if they were really prisoners and guards.
Some punishments prisoners received from guards included removal of the mattresses, paper bags over their heads, removal of clothing, and loss of bathroom rights. These humiliating punishments were easily carried out by the prison guards because of the de-individuation by giving them numbers instead of using their names.
In conclusion, this prison simulation demonstrated many psychological concepts, including groupthink, group polarization, mob mentality, herd behavior, and emulation. It explored people's ability to abuse power and positions of authority. No matter who they are, people will conform to the roles they are expected to play. Loss of rationale, independent thinking when in a group, which is also called guards brutality. Is that it? Yes.